In the year 690, a new dynasty rises. Behold the divine imperium of Empress Wu Zetian. Behold the throne. It stands elevated. It is draped in imperial yellow. You will not find the emperor. Instead, a mere child rules.
In 3,000 years of Chinese imperial history, spanning dozens of dynasties, hundreds of emperors, and one of the longest continuous civilizational traditions in human existence, exactly one person ruled China in their own name, with their own title, as the undisputed sovereign of the empire, not a regent ruling for a child, not a power behind the throne ruling through a husband, not a temporary custodian waiting for a male heir to come of age. The sovereign, the emperor, in her own right, with her own dynasty name, her own era title, her own mandate of heaven. Her name was Wu Zetian. She entered the imperial palace at 14 as a low-ranking concubine. She left it 50 years later as the only woman who ever sat on the dragon throne. This is not a story about a woman who got lucky. This is a story about the most dangerous mind in the most powerful empire on earth, and what 50 years of patience, calculation, and ruthlessness actually looks like. To understand what Wu Zetian achieved, you have to understand exactly what she was not supposed to be. The Tang Dynasty of the 7th century was by almost any measure the most sophisticated civilization on Earth. Its capital, Chang'an, was a cosmopolitan wonder, home to merchants, scholars, diplomats, and artists from across Asia and the Middle East. Its legal code was the most comprehensive in the world. Its poetry tradition was producing work that Chinese students would memorize for 1,000 years. And it was built on a social philosophy that had a very specific answer to the question of what women were for. Confucian social philosophy, the organizing principle of Chinese imperial governance for over 1,000 years, was explicit about the role of women. The 3 obediences: to father, to husband, to son. A woman moved through life as a dependent of the relevant male authority. She did not govern, she did not command armies, she did not sit in the councils where policy was made. She managed the household, bore sons, and ensured the continuation of the family line. The imperial palace itself embodied this philosophy. The inner court, the harem, housed hundreds of women in an elaborate hierarchy of status, ranging from the empress down through ranked consorts, concubines, and female officials to servants. These women lived in physical proximity to power. Very few ever touched it. In 638 AD, a 14-year-old girl named Wu Zhao entered the imperial palace as a 5th-ranked concubine, a kairen of Emperor Taizong, one of the greatest rulers in Chinese history. Her father had been a timber merchant who rose to nobility through support of the Tang dynasty's founding. She was educated, she was intelligent, she played music and had read widely, and she was, by the standards of the system she was entering, essentially invisible. She would spend the next 50 years making herself impossible to ignore. Emperor Taizong was one of the most capable rulers in Chinese history. A military genius, a sophisticated administrator, a man who genuinely sought capable counsel and created a court of extraordinary talent. He was also a man who, by contemporary accounts, barely noticed Wu Zhao. For 12 years, Wu Zhao served as a kairen, a low-ranking concubine, in Taizong's court. She was never promoted to higher ranks. She did not bear the emperor children. By the metrics by which women in the imperial court were measured, beauty sufficient to attract imperial attention, fertility sufficient to produce imperial heirs, she was, in the official account, unremarkable. But 12 years in a court, where survival depended on reading people correctly, where a single political miscalculation could mean relegation to a Buddhist convent, or worse, 12 years in that school produced something the official metrics could not measure. She learned how the Tang court actually worked, not as it was described in the Confucian texts that prescribed proper behavior for everyone involved, but as it actually functioned. The factional alliances, the bureaucratic rivalries, the specific personalities of the officials whose goodwill mattered, and those whose opposition could be safely endured. When Emperor Taizong died in 649 AD, Wu Zhao faced the fate prescribed for all imperial concubines without heirs, a Buddhist convent for life. She was 24 years old, and she had spent 12 years learning that the most dangerous place to be, in the Tang imperial court, was predictable. She had also, before Taizong's death, done something that the historical record preserves, but the Confucian historians who wrote it clearly found deeply uncomfortable to acknowledge. She had attracted the attention of Taizong's son. The crown prince, who would become Emperor Gaozong, had noticed Wu Zhao while his father still lived. This was, by Tang law and Confucian propriety, a profound transgression. A son pursuing his father's concubine. Wu Zhao understood exactly how transgressive it was. Emperor Gaozong brought Wu Zhao back from the convent within months of taking the throne. The official reason, various, the accounts differ. The actual reason, he wanted her there. She re-entered the palace as a low-ranking concubine in Gaozong's court. She would not remain low-ranking for long. Here is where Wu Zhao's political genius first becomes undeniable. The Empress Wang, threatened by another concubine, Lady Xiao, who had captured Gaozong's primary attention, made a decision that seemed reasonable in the logic of inner court politics. She supported Wu Zhao's advancement, used her as a pawn against Lady Xiao. She had no idea she was teaching a chess master how the board worked. Over the next 5 years, Wu Zhao did several things simultaneously. She bore Gaozong's sons, establishing her biological value in terms the court understood. She cultivated Gaozong's trust and affection until she was, by all accounts, his most important human relationship. She began to involve herself in matters of governance, reading documents, offering counsel, demonstrating administrative capability that far exceeded anything the inner court was supposed to produce. And here, we need to be honest about something the historical record presents but cannot resolve. The accusations against Wu Zetian are, in the accounts that survive, extreme. The death of her infant daughter, attributed by hostile sources to Wu Zhao herself. The baby allegedly killed to frame the Empress Wang. The subsequent downfall of Empress Wang and Lady Xiao, their demotion, imprisonment, and eventual deaths, the circumstances of which the sources describe with horrifying detail. Were these accusations true? The honest answer is, we cannot know. Every account of Wu Zetian's rise was written by men. Confucian officials who regarded her reign as an aberration and her ascent as a moral catastrophe, writing after her death with every reason to paint her as a monster. The pattern of exaggerated villainy attached to powerful women who broke the rules of their society is not unique to China. It is perhaps the oldest form of political character assassination in recorded history. What is not in dispute is this. By 655 AD, the Empress Wang had been deposed. Wu Zhao had been named Empress. and the most aristocratic families in China, who had opposed her elevation with every political tool available to them, had lost. By the early 660s, Emperor Gaozong's health had deteriorated severely. He suffered from debilitating headaches and vision problems that made it increasingly difficult for him to conduct the routine business of running the world's largest empire. The solution, practical, unprecedented, and deeply troubling to the Confucian officials who recorded it, was Wu Zhao. She read the documents, she received the officials, she made the recommendations that became, through Gaozong's endorsement, imperial policy. The court officials began referring to the situation as two saints ruling together, a phrase that managed to acknowledge the political reality while maintaining the fiction that the emperor remained the primary authority. It was not a fiction, it was a transition. During this period, Wu Zhao made decisions that historians, even those deeply hostile to her, have been forced to acknowledge were effective. Military campaigns that extended Tang power across Korea, administrative reforms that strengthened the imperial examination system, expanding access to the bureaucracy beyond the narrow circle of established aristocratic families who had historically dominated it, agriculture policy that improved conditions for peasant farmers, a court that rewarded demonstrated competence rather than inherited status. She was governing, and she was governing well. The aristocratic establishment that opposed her was not merely defending tradition, it was defending economic and political privilege that the examination system threatened to dilute. Wu Zhao's expansion of meritocratic selection was not just a good governance practice, it was a political weapon, creating a new class of officials whose careers and loyalties depended not on aristocratic birth, but on the sovereign who had enabled their rise. She was, in other words, building the political infrastructure of absolute power, one loyal official at a time.
When Gaozong died in 683 AD, Wu Zhao was 58 years old. She had spent 45 years navigating the most dangerous political environment on Earth. She had survived the death of one emperor, the political wars of a second emperor's court, and the opposition of the most powerful aristocratic families in China. And she was not finished. Her sons sat on the throne, she governed. The court, exhausted by decades of her political dominance, unable to imagine how to stop what was clearly coming, watched. In 684, the opposition made its move. A coalition of Tang princes and aristocratic families launched a military rebellion, the explicit goal removing Wu Zhao from power and restoring genuine authority to the Tang imperial line. It failed. Within months, the rebellion was crushed, its leaders were executed, their families were purged from the aristocratic roles, their networks were dismantled. The years following the rebellion were the hardest in Wu Zhao's career to defend. She used informants, she used secret police, she used judicial mechanisms that allowed accusations to become convictions with frightening speed. People died who may have been guilty only of being associated with the wrong families. This is the part of her story where the vilification of later historians finds its most solid historical ground. And it is also the part where an honest observer has to ask, what was the alternative? Wu Zhao had no legal framework that acknowledged her authority as legitimate, no precedent she could cite, no institution that formally recognized what she was. Every day of her power was a day in which a sufficiently organized opposition could theoretically restore the traditional order, because the traditional order had never formally ended. A man in her position would have been called ruthless. For a woman in her position, a woman who had no right, by every principle of the civilization she governed, to be in that position at all. Survival required something beyond ruthlessness. It required the complete transformation of the system itself. In 690 AD, at 65 years old, Wu Zhao declared herself Emperor of China. She named her dynasty the Zhou. She took the title Shengshen Huangdi, Holy and Divine Emperor. The court, assembled in full ceremonial splendour, accepted, because they had no choice. But also because she had, over 50 years of demonstrated competence, given them a reason beyond fear to acknowledge that she was capable of what she claimed. Wu Zetian ruled China for 15 years, 15 years of actual functioning imperial government, not regency, not shared authority, not the polite fiction of ruling through a male nominal superior. 15 years of the impossible. Historians who have examined the reign, moving past the Confucian vilification and the feminist rehabilitation, tend to reach a complicated conclusion. She was neither the monster her enemies described nor the saint her defenders have sometimes claimed. She was an extraordinarily capable ruler who used every tool available to maintain power in a system that provided no legitimate basis for her authority, and who governed, by the evidence of results, more effectively than many of the emperors who surrounded her reign. By 705 AD, Wu Zetian was 80 years old. Her health was failing, and the court, patient, organised, waiting, moved. In the first month of 705 AD, a group of officials forced their way into her palace. They demanded she abdicate in favour of her son. At 80 years old, with no army willing to die for her against the court's consensus, she had no viable option. She abdicated. Zhongzong, her son, the man she had deposed, was restored. The Zhou dynasty, which had existed for 15 years, ended. The Tang dynasty resumed. She died 9 months later. She was buried with the honours of an emperor, and she left something that has puzzled, fascinated, and moved historians for 13 centuries. Her memorial stele, the stone tablet that would traditionally record the achievements of an emperor's reign, is blank. No text, no list of achievements, no official accounting of what she had done, just stone. Whether the blank stele was her own final decision, a statement that her achievements defied conventional enumeration, or that she left her legacy to history's judgment, or whether it was imposed by the court that restored the Tang order after her death, no one knows. History has not left it blank. The story of Wu Zetian is usually told as one of two things: as a cautionary tale, the monster who manipulated her way to power through cruelty and transgression, whose reign was an aberration that the Tang dynasty was right to erase, or as a triumph, the feminist icon who broke every barrier, proved every doubter wrong, and demonstrated that women could rule as effectively as men. Both of these stories are too simple, and both of them miss the warning that Wu Zetian's life actually carries. Here is what her story actually shows: a system that refuses to acknowledge the capability of half its population, does not eliminate that capability. It simply forces it underground. The Tang dynasty's system, designed explicitly to keep women out of formal power, was also the system that gave Wu Zhao 45 years of education in how power actually worked. The inner court was not a gilded cage, it was a political laboratory, and she was its most attentive student. The examination system she expanded, giving capable people without aristocratic birth access to the bureaucracy, outlasted her by 1,000 years. It was one of the most consequential administrative reforms in Chinese history. It was implemented by a woman the official record spent centuries calling a usurper. The blank stele is the most honest thing about her, because the truth of Wu Zetian defies the categories that the civilization she ruled had available to describe her. She was not what a woman was supposed to be. She was not what an emperor was supposed to be. She was not what a villain is supposed to be, or what a hero is supposed to be. She was something the system had no word for, a person of extraordinary capability in a world that had designed its every institution to ensure that people like her never got to show it. She showed it anyway. Civilizations that suppress what they cannot categorize do not eliminate it. They simply delay the moment when it stops asking permission. Wu Zetian stopped asking permission. At 14, she entered a palace that had no place for what she was. At 65, she sat on its throne, and the stele is blank because some things are beyond what stone can hold.